first like to thank you for attending this event on the first European Asylum Support Office Country of Origin report on Afghanistan. Dr. Vizer, the Executive Director of the European Asylum Support Office, will be giving you a presentation to explain, first of all, why we have chosen Afghanistan for our first Country of Origin report. We will then have some time for questions. And also I would like to remind you that we have left some copies of the press release and the reports, which you can pick up. Now I leave you with Dr. Vizer for his presentation.
Thank you very much. Welcome to all of you. It's very good to have you here at this presentation of the first report, or I should say reports, because there are two, of EASO, the new agency on asylum. Both reports are about country of origin information, COI, a very distinct and vital element in all decisions in the asylum decision-making process. The quality of the information, the assessment we have of the countries of origin, the countries that the people who ask for protection claim to come from, is essential for the final decision on their request for international protection. That is one of the main reasons that the new agency has from the beginning got the task to organize reports, assessments on different countries of origin. The first that we are presenting is on Afghanistan. And I'll give you very short the conclusions, and I go into that later on. The main conclusions are recruitment is organized locally. And two, the use of direct force, I underline direct force, I will come back on that, is exceptional as far as recruitment is concerned. But the report also touches upon the different ethnicities, the miners as fighters, the use of bombers and suicide attackers, and of the use of support in the population for the Taliban. How did we decide to go for Afghanistan? A little anecdote. I started the office some more than a year ago, and as in the regulation it was stipulated that COI reports should be one of the eventual products of the agency. I was in the beginning of the startup asked what countries I thought of. Well, there are about 200 and something countries, so there is a large choice, even if you ignore the EU countries as such. But I had not very much time before I answered. There are either two at this moment, that was 2 years ago, two at this moment to think of. One is Afghanistan and the other is Iraq. At Iraq at that very moment was clearly slowing down and going in the right direction. I said probably at this moment it will be Afghanistan. It became Afghanistan. But not only because of my primary feeling, also because of a short analysis that Afghanistan, ever since the conflict, before the several conflicts in succession, has influenced the asylum seekers' influx to nearly all the EU member states. So it is the biggest common denominator, so to say, if you touch on Afghanistan. You can always say there is, for certain areas, certain regions, there is a more important country, but to start off, certainly it is fair to make the biggest reach. People looked at me rather strange when I said that. Couldn't you have chosen an easy country to start with? Afghanistan is very difficult, we know that. It's difficult for the long history. It's difficult for the many separate experiences. It's difficult because of the nature of the country itself to get the information, etc. But by and large, it was considered that it was of primary importance to go to Afghanistan and to dig into the substance of Afghanistan. Maybe to underline and to show you a little more explicitly, not my name, but maybe Daniela, the next slide. I'll show you very short, I will not keep you longer than necessary, but pictures of Afghanistan and why Afghanistan for all of us is important. And we use a quantitative and a qualitative approach, which is a new system that we are developing as an agency. That's a different subject, but it comes in handily. Next, please. This is the top 3 influx, most recent influx last year of the 27 member states. Here you see, suppose that we could, yeah, Afghanistan is on top, really on top. That is by far the largest. For 17 countries, Afghanistan is in the top number 3 influx. That by itself already explains why Afghanistan is so important. I will leave the rest for time's sake. Next, please. This is the development of Afghanistan for the last 4 years only. I could go back to 1979 with the Russian invasion, but this is only the last 4 years, just to give you an idea. This is based on Eurostat validated data. Don't ask me for the exact data. This is the definition of Eurostat, but that is the common definition to use. Starting in February 2008, you see Greece as the first peak. This is a clock. 2008 starts here, 2009, 2010, 2011, and then December 2011. So you can see by this clock statistic the development of the influx, starting in Greece. Next one, please. Going on to Italy. It's quite interesting to see the different fluxes. Next one, please. Going half a year later to the UK. Going to France, the Netherlands, Belgium, Austria. And if you would have kept in your mind that the flash is only the longest, the biggest influx, but that, for example, there are smaller flashes here as well, which are still quite considerable. So a lot of countries that had their highest influx at the flash still continue to have influxes like the UK, like the Netherlands, like a number of other countries. So it is not only a long-standing problem, it's a day-to-day reality in many member states. Next one, please. Next. It's only underlining what I was saying. This is another interesting thing that we can conclude from the Eurostat statistics. That is the decision rate in the different member states of the European Union. And where on the national level, member states use a recognition rate, the number of people, the percentage of the number of people that have been accepted as asylum seeker or as international protection seeker, we use the negative decision rate. That means that the number of people that have received a no. Why is that? It is less accurate from a legal point of view, but it is the best way to compare the different systems. Still, within the 27 member states, there are different systems of recognition. They're not all the definitions are exactly the same. So if you compare uncomparable definitions, then you have an uncomparable outcome. Negative is negative. Negative is no. That's an easier distinction, an easier way to compare, and that's why we use negative decision rates. There are discussions about the negative decision rate as well. So it is not absolute. It is just an instrument for us to indicate more or less the differences. And on Afghanistan, you see that there are substantial differences within the European Union on the negative decision rate. There are, in one country, people from Afghanistan they have a different chance to be recognized or rejected than in other countries. That can have to do something with the background of the people seeking asylum. It's not one-to-one that a country is a country is a country. No, there are different regions, there are different tribes, etc. So it is not to be conclusive in a certain direction, but it is at least something that needs further analysis. It is remarkable that the differences, if the average is 55 and the difference, the standard deviation is 28%, that is quite substantial. So it needs at least more analysis. Please, next one. That's just a little for the background. What have we done? Why do we have two reports? We started by analyzing how a COI report should be and what the function of a COI report should be to have the maximum support for the member states to decide in individual cases. This is not about individual cases. It is the assessment of a situation in a country of origin. And on the basis of this assessment, a caseworker, an individual asylum officer can say, oh, you say you are from that and that region. Could you explain me then why you speak about this region, because that is not in the same area? And then if you say that you have been recruited by this and this local community, but that local community is in the other side of Afghanistan and not here. The startup for the screening and the asylum interview. But before you make a COI report, an assessment, we thought, and that was not by coincidence, we have some experience from past efforts, that there is one thing preliminary to COI reports. And that is that you are absolutely transparent in what you do and how you do it. The reason why in the past efforts, bilateral, multilateral efforts within the European Union have failed to produce COI reports before, this is the very first EU-wide COI report, is that there are different traditions on these sorts of reports. Some are public, some are not public, some use different information from others. So you should be absolutely clear from the very beginning what you do, how you do it, where you make the choices, and that everybody can follow the process. Why is that in the end so important? That is important because in the end the asylum process is always, in general terms, individual cases it might be different, but in general terms always judged by the court, by judges, by independent judges, and they have to follow back the whole decision process. They have to have the same information to check the process as the decision makers did themselves. So before we started to work on Afghanistan, we started to work on a methodology which is quite new and quite interesting as a process. We organized the writing of this report setting up of this report by taking on board all the expertise that we have in Europe. Member states, but also other sorts of expertise. UNHCR was involved, IOM was involved. Trying to have the best practices, trying to put together the things that work, forgetting about the things that do not work, being very explicit and very open. Subsequently, starting to write on the subject. Keeping in mind that if the subject can be as good a story as it is, but if it's not compatible with the methodology, if it's not to be tracing back to an open system and a transparent process, then it will not be accepted. Also, this report on Afghanistan, and this is part 1 that concentrates on strategies of Taliban and recruitment of Taliban, is made in an open, partly interactive process. At a certain moment you have to accept that someone is writing, that not everybody can write at the same time the same report, but as interactive as possible, also with experts from member states, with a lot of input of NGOs, international organizations, UNHCR, etc. were involved as well. So there's a lot of input. There are, and I'm nearly finalizing my introduction, there are, as I said, a number of conclusions to be drawn. As recruitment is one of the major subjects that caseworkers, that asylum officers in their day-to-day work on Afghanistan are confronted with. Yes, maybe I was wrong, but I was forcefully recruited by the Taliban. The Taliban forced me, etc. So the whole discussion, how to look at the phenomenon of recruitment and forced recruitment, is an essential part in those who work on the ground, and that's in the end what EASO is for, supporting the member states in the operational and practical activities, is a day-to-day question that is in many asylum interviews from Afghani. Even those who do not claim to be recruited themselves refer to others, to family, etc. So there is that overall Taliban idea. The 2 main conclusions on this are that the recruitment is locally. Everything that I say is mainly. I mean, there are nuances on regional level, on time level, in different periods. There are different, all described in here. I give only the very abstract overall reason. That the recruitment is locally. That is important, because that means that recruitment and the recruiter, the recruited and the recruiter, probably know each other. It's not someone that comes from a secluded area of Taliban fighters and come into some area where he has never been before, probably he, though not only, as you can read in the report, then comes there and recruits forcefully. No, forced recruitment at such an area, and if you have ever been in Afghanistan, which I can promise you is quite an exciting experience, then you know that you are not just going somewhere without any background. So local element is very important. Ethnic element is important, but there are nuances. It's not the same as in many publications is that it is only Pashto, but there are certainly other religious, ethnic elements, but in a certain majority-minority relation. The other point I would like to touch on, which I said in the beginning, is the forced recruitment. The conclusion of this report is that forced recruitment is exceptional. I have to make two remarks on this. Forced recruitment is defined in a limited way. Forced recruitment is really by force. That is different from all sorts of psychological effects, etc., that you can have in communities. That is described as well, also in the last analytical paragraph, that you have situations of intimidation, of family relations in whatever sense, that you have minors who are indoctrinated on schools, etc. But the elements in the actual asylum case for asylum officers that say, no, I was forcefully recruited, is to be considered as a very one-to-one argument that in an asylum interview you should be able to go on to and ask, yes, but how then, etc. Once again, you can have wider definitions. UNHCR, for example, uses a wider definition, which from their task is very understandable. But for this very specific reason for caseworkers, we have used the limited, the narrow definition. Last point, this is not a very thick report. We could have written a report that was 5 times as big. But one, that would be more difficult to read, and two, this is written, of course, you all can have a copy, but this is written with the eye of an asylum officer who should very quickly say, okay, this person claims from this place, this background, then I should have this, and not say, okay, do you have 10 minutes, then I'm going to read 3 chapters. But it's at the same time written with a lot of information. There is no black and white picture of no part of the world, and Afghanistan is the same. It is a complicated country with a very complicated and exciting history. So the individual case, the individual situation always can be different from the general picture here and even from the very precise picture here. What's next? Next is that we work on part 2, Afghanistan, Taliban strategies. Give me the official name, Christoph.
The intimidation and targeted violence.
I have to try that. End of this year, we hope to publish part 2. At the same time, we will have to decide as an organization what will be the next steps. Concentrate on a certain area, for example, Afghanistan, Pakistan, or take different parts. That is still an ongoing discussion. I can come back on that later on. Last point. A number of people have asked me what will be the status of the report you produce. My answer is simple. EASO is, for this work, a independent center of expertise. As an independent center of expertise, we have done, to the best of our knowledge, a great deal of work. This is the result, and it is for the practitioners, for the decision makers, for the judges, for the academics to decide the quality of the report. I think, and I'm convinced, that it is an excellent piece of work, state of the art at this moment, but it's not for me to decide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vizer, for this extensive presentation.
Sorry, I was too long.
No, you weren't. It was very interesting. We will now open the floor for questions, if there are any, and I suggest we take one question at a time. Yes, we open the floor. Any questions? Sorry, could you also inform us your name and which organization you represent?
From the Wall Street Journal. Do you anticipate, as a result of the considerations in this report on the part of asylum officers, an increase or a decrease in the acceptance rate for Afghan asylum seekers in EU countries?
That is a very interesting question. What I hope and expect, but the expectation is based on my assessment that it is a quality report, is that this report will contribute to the quality of the asylum decisions. If that will be more in one direction or more in the other direction, I'm unable to predict. But what I am, and that is absolutely the ambition and the mission of the agency, is to contribute to the quality of the asylum process in Europe.
Yes, Justine from Reuters.
A question that's related to the future. It's widely understood that once the international coalition pulls out of Afghanistan in 2014, it's seen as a time when there's a lot of concern about upheaval at the time and a push from the Taliban to gain more of a foothold in Afghanistan. Do you think, based on sort of the research that the organization has done, are you sort of concerned or how that there could be a larger sort of an increase in the run-up to this period in the recruitment efforts by Taliban and therefore more asylum seekers in Europe, or afterwards related to that upheaval related to Taliban making a stronger push in Afghanistan? Like how is that? What kind of effect are we expecting in Europe from the asylum perspective?
There are great historians that say that we only can understand the future if we understand the past. But as a historian myself, I would not change that into using the past as a prediction of the future, because that are two different things. What we have been doing is making an assessment to the best of our knowledge of the past. That already is very, very difficult, given all the discussions that I don't need to go into. You are familiar with it. I think this is a fair picture, as best as we can make on the information we have now. But projecting it to the future developments is never been the aim of this report, and is certainly not the capacity that I'm in here. I might have other opinions on it, but not here.
Any other questions? Okay. I'd like to thank you for attending this event. And just do not forget to pick up a copy of the reports and the press release before leaving the room. Thanks a lot.